Why don't you go ahead and reintroduce yourself? I know you've privileged us with an update in the past and give us a little background, and then we'll turn to Scott because I think you only have about 10 minutes that you were available.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the invitation, Vicky and Mona, for pinging me. I'm Kathleen Staks. I'm the Executive Director of Western Freedom. We are, for those who don't know, really just a political campaign focused on regionalization of the Western electricity grid, working on behalf of large commercial and industrial customers. So we're with a handful of folks on this call and in the work that we're doing. As part of that role, I'm also the co-chair of the launch committee for the West-Wide Governance Pathways Initiative, which is, I think from an RTO standpoint, probably the most active and new part of this conversation. Certainly, we're seeing day-ahead market progress with CAISO and with SPP. EDAM obviously got approved by FERC in the most part at the end of last year. So the CAISO is working to kind of fix the final couple of things with that. And Markets Plus, SPP will likely file the Markets Plus tariff sometime in February. So having those two day-ahead markets continue along a parallel path has created a really interesting dynamic and urgency in this space around what does the RTO look like? Because we've been in a place where CAISO can't be the RTO for the West because of their governance restrictions and the CAISO board being appointed by the governor and appointed by the California Senate. SPP is expanding their RTO into the West, but is also not in a position yet to be the RTO operator for the entire West without, I think, some probably pretty major governance changes for them as well. So we're sort of in this funky position of, all right, what do we do? Is there an opportunity for the West to really develop and create something that fits with all of the unique challenges, resources, politics, players? You pick your thing. We've got it here in the West. Even from a geography standpoint, thinking about where the population centers are and then the big vast spaces between them. We are a unique and very special snowflake, if we do say so ourselves. So the Pathways Initiative, for those who don't know, was really kind of kicked off last summer by regulators in 5 states: Arizona, New Mexico, California, Oregon, and Washington. And over the subsequent months, really got turned over to a broad and diverse set of stakeholders. So taking it out of the hands of the regulators in the states and putting it in the hands of a 26-member launch committee representing 12 different sectors. Scott and I are both on there representing different sectors to work on this. We're at a point now where what we're trying to do is figure out how can we create a new and independent organization that can build upon the market services that particularly CAISO has developed and offered, the EIM and EDAM, minimize costs, ultimately offer all market services up to and including an RTO, and serve the largest footprint possible, maximizing benefits to customers. There are all kinds of challenges with that, but I think many of us who sort of entered this effort with a healthy dose of skepticism have been pleasantly surprised with the dedication and effort and progress that this group has been able to make. I see Tyler from APS on here. Ali Kozlov from APS has also been on the launch committee, and having utilities like APS and NV Energy really participating and driving this conversation helps us move towards a solution that we think can actually work for the West. There are all kinds of other challenges that exist. with current CAISO offerings, with current SPP offerings, there's lots of things to be worked out. But I think what it looks like at this point in time is that we will have a plan with steps and actions to take over the coming months that will move us towards this fully independent organization, that will include direction on what kind of legislative change might need to happen in California to enable the CAISO to partner with this new entity. This is not a change to the CAISO governance, as we've seen in the past. This is really more of how can a new independent entity operate with CAISO and the market offerings that they already have. So yes.
Kathleen, is there a new proposal in the California legislature? Because they've looked at this previously, right?
They have, and the same proposal to change the governance structure of the California ISO has been introduced and failed multiple times now. And we have gotten a very clear message from the legislature, from labor, from the Gov's office. We don't want to see that again. And so part of the focus for this pathways work is, how do we do this differently? How can we, and I actually think this is in many ways a much better solution for the West, because it is Western stakeholders that are coming together to really kind of start from scratch on a governance structure for a new entity. And then just building on the technical market pieces that are already in existence. So we're not reinventing the wheel on the market operations and those technical functions. But we're creating a process that will have a lot of very broad, diverse, robust, pick your adjective, engagement from stakeholders, including potential market participants, including customers, including public interest organizations, communities that are harder to reach, tribes, governments, pick your thing. We are looking to try to find a way to get input from all of these different groups in how do we create a market that really does respect state energy priorities, that enables a lot more coordination, a lot more cost-effective management of the system and development of new resources, both from a generation and a transmission standpoint, meets the very diverse political scenarios that we have, between Wyoming and an Oregon. Well, Western Oregon anyway, not Eastern Oregon. But I think this is I am optimistic that we have so much engagement on this right now. Of course, we have to continue to demonstrate progress and momentum and actual movement forward, or this thing won't work. And so we've been trying to manage this sort of tension between the need to move quickly and the need to do it right. So that has, and Scott can probably fill in any gaps that I've left. But I'm happy to answer any questions about that at this point, if anybody has any.
Do you see that some of the members of this organization could contribute who aren't already? And if so, how?
So there are a couple of different ways to get engaged. So each of us on the launch committee who's representing a sector, and we have, large commercial and industrial customer sector, we have IPPs and developers, we have IOUs, we have public power. So each of those sort of groups is represented on the launch committee. If you are not receiving updates from your sector representative, you could reach out to me and I'd be happy to connect you with whoever that person is so that you can we're trying to send out sort of, I say bi-weekly, but I never know whether that means like twice a week or every 2 weeks, because apparently it means both. Every 2 weeks, sector email updates to just keep people apprised of what's going on. We have a monthly stakeholder call where we actually have an opportunity for people to hear from the launch committee and then ask questions and have a conversation. We have some, we will continue to have some public comment opportunities. We actually have one open right now. Comments close tomorrow. Excuse me. But we'll always accept questions, comments, thoughts and ideas. We want to be having as transparent and open and interactive a process as we possibly can. I think, right now we've been focusing a lot of work on some of the administrative stuff of late. When we start to get to a point where we're actually chewing on what should a governance structure look like, I think we're going to have to reevaluate how we're engaging and collecting input from a broader group of stakeholders, because that's really where we need, I think, more technical input, and certainly from a group like this would welcome all of those perspectives. We're not quite there yet. So, and Scott will tell you, if you want to hop on and have a conversation about the suggestion tool on a Google Doc, have I got a call for you? However, but I think there are certainly ways to get regular updates and information. And if you're not getting it and would like to be added, just let me know.
Tyler, you posted a link. Is that where people can find out more?
Yep, I believe so. I think it's the Weeb website is the best place.
Thanks.
That's absolutely right. Yep, that website right there is sort of the landing page that we have that has all of the public-facing documents, including the technical options that the launch committee has been evaluating, our charter and mission, the roster of who's on the launch committee, public meeting information. So all of those things are on that website. Thank you, Tyler.
Any more questions for Kathleen before we turn it over to Scott?
Yes, hi. I have a question for Kathleen. Nice to meet you. This is Matt Pagan, and I'm representing NL Green Power. It seems like there are various proposals with different levels of independence from CAISA for governance and decision making.
Mm-hmm.
So, from a political acceptance perspective, how do you kind of view those proposals from California and the rest of the West in terms of level of independence?
It's a good question. The definition of independence has been something that we've kind of chewed on a bit here. And to me, the level of independence shouldn't be too hard. We've got other RTOs and ISOs around the country to look at that have independent boards. And so looking at those as sort of an example of what independence needs to look like within this context seems like a good place to start. As far as the different options go, the nuances between one or another kind of come down to who has authority over the tariff and the 205 filing rights. And part of what we're going to have to evaluate is what can we pull out of CAISO? How much is that going to cost from a technical standpoint, from a job standpoint? And looking at all of those different evaluation criteria to figure out what is the most feasible path, technically, economically, politically, for us to get to this independent entity, and ensuring that the market functions are overseen by an independent entity where no individual market participant has any more influence or say over any other than anyone else. I think that's part of the tension right now, is that you've got the CAISO is both a balancing authority and the market operator, and sometimes those priorities conflict. So this is all going to be part of the evaluation process that the launch committee is going to be going through to get to that ultimate recommendation. And along the way, there will certainly be opportunities for input from the public on, this makes sense from an independent standpoint, this does not. So we'll have opportunities to take those comments into account.
So you don't
Thanks,
have
we
a top
appreciate it.
favorite at this point?
Do we have? I know one that's not on the table, really. I think option 4, which looks very much like what we have tried in the past and really pulls apart the CAISO, does not seem to be an appealing future state for really anyone, but we wanted to ensure that we kind of had these bookends that really showed the full spectrum of what we're considering here, so that we can do a very thorough evaluation.
Any other questions?
I had a question. This is Shelley Gordon. What if you opted for just a balancing authority and skip the market piece of the RTO, I guess? I mean, or maybe that isn't an RTO, but can you explain the thinking there? Like, does it have to include the market, buying power, day ahead market or EIM market, whatever the options are?
I mean,
And then my second question, is there a sense of a timeline to this, or is this sort of open-ended? And, because everything takes so long in terms of making change. So anyway, those are my two questions. Thank you.
Indeed. We have 38 balancing authorities right now that operate, some perfectly happily and independently. And I think the idea is, to the extent that we can reduce the inefficiencies of having those 38 independent balancing authorities, and have these market constructs where you're creating, opportunities to buy and sell and plan to buy and sell those excess resources, being able to match up, Pacific Northwest Hydro with Desert Southwest Solar and vice versa. Having that bigger footprint has been shown to increase the benefits from an economic standpoint, from a resource diversity standpoint, reliability standpoint. I think those market constructs are really what we're aiming towards here. I think the thought is that this new independent entity will be able to offer all market services up to and including an RTO, without assuming that everybody is going to want to jump into an RTO. So this is not like RTO or nothing. This is I don't know how this works, because this is not my area of expertise. Maybe Scott can provide more, but being able to have those market constructs where we've really got a bigger footprint and more participants who can maximize the benefits. From a timing standpoint, we're moving as fast as we can. I mean, the original goal, which was probably laughable when it was originally said out loud, was to have a nominating committee and board in place by this spring. That is not going to happen. But I do think that we, in the next 2 to 3 months, and I will be conservative on this, we should have a path forward mapped out that includes milestones and timelines, and what needs to happen when, for us to get to this full independent entity. There may be a multi-step process. That's something that the launch committee is talking about. Are there incremental changes we can make to the current CAISO and EIM governing body sort of joint authority structure that could move things along while we continue to work on the full governance for a new independent entity, that could come along in a year. So I think there's, we're not looking at a decade. We're really, I think, trying to get something in place in the next, 18 to 24 months.
Okay,
That
thank
was
you.
very helpful.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to turn to Scott to honor everyone's time, and Kathleen, please stay on if you want, but I'll send out the recording if you can't hear everything he has to offer.
Go get him, Scott.
Well, Kathleen and I so very seldom speak. It's hard to communicate. Actually, we'll be seeing each other next week in Portland for a Pathways face-to-face discussion of the launch committee. But and I appreciate Kathleen sort of teeing it off, because Kathleen has done yeoman work in being one of the co-chairs of Pathways, and she's managed to do it without having to be heavily medicated, which is
As far as you know.
as far as I know. But let me just sort of say, this is such a dynamic process. And when Vicky asked me to sort of update this group based on what I had said at an SPP leadership summit in Phoenix, November 1st, I said, I'll be happy to reiterate some of those points, but let me first frame it within the context of how things have changed since then. I had assumed that when CAISO filed its EDAM tariff in August, and by the way, WPTF filed some protests about aspects of it. We're very supportive of EDAM, but there were some aspects that we filed a protest at FERC. I thought, okay, great. Then we'll just spend some time working on an SPP Markets Plus tariff, and we'll be done. I won't have to get on as many United flights and my frequent flyer mileage accumulation will go down. Not so. I have been inundated by the rush to try to finalize work on the SPP Markets Plus tariff at the same time that this pathways process has picked up speed. And let me just put a slightly different twist. I'm one of the people on the launch committee and the independents are represented not just by Western Power Trading Forum, but NIPSI operates predominantly in the Pacific Northwest, is involved in it. Interwest is involved in it. So the independents have been participating in this quite strongly, along with IOUs, publics, large buyers, and things like that. Importantly, one of the aspects that gave this Pathways initiative in terms of what can we do to make the governance of an entity for a market that includes California independent enough for people to join while still respecting state laws. And if we subsequently need to do something to change state laws, what are those things? And when I first came and saw this, I thought this was just a Band-Aid to be put on an effort of a failed legislative effort at the California legislature this year. And then suddenly, as I involved myself in it, I found that this began to pick up speed and momentum of people, including, public interest organizations, and importantly, as I've said, labor from California, which had been the problem, the sticking problem in the California legislature, of recognizing that if they didn't do something really quickly, there's a great possibility that California could be sort of walled off and be, the equivalent of East Germany, and not to use any sort of socialist comparisons. But so this recognition has led people to really strain and look hard at what can be done under current law, hire legal authority to look at both applicable state laws and aspects of the Federal Power Act, and FERC viewpoints on getting towards a structure of, and some people have alluded to the options that they've seen in the Pathways initiatives. Is it greater shared governance between the sort of WEAM board, governing body, and the CAISO board? What does that look like? Do you shift more of the 205 rights to the WEAM board in anticipation of a broader day-ahead market? Do you have a jump ball 205 rights like they have in New England, where ISO New England and NEPOOL have both 205 rights, and FERC has to adjudicate them? These sorts of options. And as Kathleen suggested, this launch committee is working towards having a pathway, at least for enhanced shared governance beyond what is currently contemplated, as well as a possible pathway for a fully independent structure, which may include some sort of requirement for change of legislation. Again, the stakeholder group that's involved in this gives one hope that this is going to happen. It's interesting having this sort of discussion about both this and SPP Markets Plus. We've gotten people who feel like if you're involved in Pathways, then you must hate Markets Plus, or if you're involved in Markets Plus, you must hate California. Well, for independent power producers and power marketers, we don't have transmission to give to and join an organization. And so for our members, we've been working hard between the WPTF consultants and myself to try to cover both of them. We're agnostic. We want markets. Personally speaking, I think, and while I have great respect for both SPP staff and CAISO staff, they're both professional, but they're both very good. They're both independent. Personally, I would find it unsatisfying to have a Western market where there was California and maybe a few Oregon utilities, and then the rest of the West, because that leads to seams. Seams are manageable from an RTO sense. By the way, in a previous life, I used to work for PJM when we did the seams agreement with MISO and SPP. But with a day-ahead market where we're going to operate a day-ahead market and respect all the oats, this is something that's never happened before. And so we don't know what the seams are that are going to exist to manage. So we're working in both of these. Both of these are making tremendous progress. And I think one of the reasons that it's happening organically inside the West is, as we all know, there's this energy transition going on. Thermal resources are retiring, whether for economics or for state policy reasons, they're retiring. We're having an addition of renewables, whether this is because of state policies or because there are tax incentives. The reality is this is happening. And so I was on FERC staff, another part of my spotted resume. I was on FERC staff when a complaint came in against WAPA by Avangrid because they were being curtailed, their renewable resources were being curtailed. And while FERC doesn't have much jurisdiction over WAPA and BPA tariffs, there are reliability aspects to it. And so FERC used its reliability jurisdiction to require WAPA to change how it handled curtailments of renewables. Suddenly it began to dawn on people that with renewables, sometimes they would produce more electrons than you could consume. Sometimes they wouldn't produce enough for you to utilize. So you needed a broader market for this. And that's why, as I've explained to my colleagues in the East and former colleagues at FERC, this is why there's an organic interest in market integration in the West, where prior to this, there was great resistance to market integration. But this leads me to my other issue with regard to how we're approaching this in the West, and that is the day-ahead market approach. And I recognize it's a political reality, and it's something that I've got to live with rather than going to a single tariff network, security constrained economic dispatch, a network dispatch. But let me just sort of say that that when people talk about the market, I think we're very fixated on the buying and selling of resources. But what a network dispatch does, and I think this is really, really important, is it is managing a scarce resource. It is allowing you to move resources through the transmission system, because what it's really telling you and what you're really buying is congestion, whether there's congestion on the system. This is a way to ration scarcity on the transmission system. You can buy and sell, with firm capacity. One of the problems with the contract path methodology is it's a fiction. It's it's a counting mechanism to try to make the transmission system look like a gas pipeline. It's not. Electrons behave differently than molecules. They follow a path of least resistance. And so when you operate as a broad network, rather than limiting your pathway on a contract path methodology, because you're doing that because you don't want to, and you're restricting the ability to move electrons on that because you don't want to overload your pathway and then affect your neighbor's congestion on their system. But you dispatch this on a network basis, a network transmission basis, then you're able to utilize a greater amount of the transmission system. And so this is the key. We all know that the West needs more transmission, physical transmission. But what we immediately can do with the network dispatch is utilize the current transmission better. And so I will just point, if anybody's interested in data that suggests just how profound the network dispatch and the utilization of the transmission system can be versus the contract path system, I will point them to a study that was done after the folding in of AEP into the PJM system. This is a study that it was great because there was one day when AEP was not part of the PJM system in 2004, and then suddenly the next day it was. And they have data that shows that almost a doubling of throughput in the AEP system once it joined PJM. That's kind of extraordinary because AEP is what I would call a really robust transmission 765 kV system. And the fact that, and it spans several states, the fact that it could almost double its throughput by being part of PJM demonstrates how incredible the power of operating as a network is, as opposed to just utilization of the contract path approach to transmission allocation. So just this is a way of sort of saying we're talking about moving resources, but that we're really talking about utilization of the transmission system. And Vicky, did I see that you wanted to ask me something?
Yes, yeah, because I have a lot of a personal experience with that contract path versus network. And just because there's various degrees of technical depth in our members, simply could each of the 38 banking areas and the utilities associated with that file a network tariff, or you have to have a new structure to accomplish what you're talking about?
Well, let's put it this way, and that gets to the sort of day-ahead market, and one of the interesting aspects of it. I won't say difficulties because we don't know. We haven't operated one yet. You can do network dispatch, but the problem is that unless you're doing it in concert with your neighbors, you're not doing very much. You need to operate all those several balancing areas together that traditionally are involved in some sort of congestion together to form this network. And that goes to one of the difficulties is who's going to operate that network? Well, if you're let me just pick somebody. If you're Nevada Energy, do you want PNM operating your system? No, you don't. If you're PNM, you don't want Nevada operating your system. So as a consequence, you want an independent operating, having operational control of those transmission systems. Now, what we're trying to do in the Western context is we're taking these balancing areas, we're maintaining the open access transmission tariffs, OATS, the approved for OATS, but we're also going to have a tariff that is for the day-ahead market. Presumably, and presumably these are all going to be able to work together, but there's no requirement, and it may be difficult to do, that when you make a change in the day-ahead tariff, say that EDAM operates or SPP Markets Plus operates, the OATs don't have an obligation to change any applicable part of their tariff to it. So I worry about that future going forward. I want to emphasize a day-ahead market is a step forward from the status quo, but there are problems associated with it. And this leads me to a little bit of an announcement, a little bit of news. WPTF joined together with Public Generating Pool of public utilities up in the Pacific Northwest to fund a SEAM study with Energy Strategies out of Salt Lake City. Caitlin Leotiris, who many of you may know, who's a consultant for WPTF, has been the leader on this, working with Carrie Bentley from Gridwell, our CAISO committee, on a SEAM study for day-ahead markets. Now, this is a little bit challenging because we don't know where the SEAM is going to be in between EDAM and SP Markets Plus. And there has never been a day-ahead market operated before. But this SEAM study will be available shortly, and it will be first made available to WPTF members and public generating pool members. But we're likely going to preview this with some states and CREPC, and it'll be widely available shortly. And while it doesn't come with dispositive outcomes, it does suggest that based on previous experience of RTOs, which have had some difficulty fully implementing joint operating agreements to manage seams between, say, PJM, MISO, SPP, that sort of thing, where there's only a single tariff in each of these RTOs, that the tools that they have developed over years are probably not available in a day-ahead market context, or at least as far as we can tell by going through the proposed tariffs of both EDAM and Markets Plus. And so therefore, it is going to be harder to manage the seams in a day-ahead process than it is an RTO. That doesn't to say that it can't be done, but it's going to be a hard effort to do that. Speaking personally, I think it suggests that at some point, I hope we consolidate from multiple, maintaining the BAs to a single tariff inside of a day-ahead market, rather than maintaining all these. There's a little bit of history to this. When MISO started back in 2004, its day-ahead market started in 2004. The utilities had never been part of a power pool before, and so they decided that they wanted to keep their control centers somewhat analogous to a BA. And after about a year, they went, nah, this is kind of stupid. There's no upside to maintaining the control center, and there's just downside. So there was just one control center, that was MISO. That is a slightly different twist than maintaining BAs, but I'm hopeful that we'll get to that point. That is just, so I'm hopeful that between whatever EDAM becomes and whatever SPP Markets Plus becomes, and they're both shooting for a 2026 market live date, and whatever the governance structures are, which of course will influence decisions by utilities as to which one they join, that this will be an improvement on the status quo. But in my mind, I don't know that it's going to be as efficient as if we even had just 2 RTOs. But having said that, we're going to be in a better position than we are right now in terms of dealing with. We're obviously the most resource constrained region in the country. Once we are able to move power more efficiently across the grid, we'll be in better shape than we are right now. I think that's probably enough to
Well,
go over.
Scott, yeah, you are a wealth of information, and I want to hear from APS, and if TEP wants to offer anything, especially about the seams, that was really interesting. And if you can stay on, I was hoping to have some dialogue. I would like to wrap it up at like about 10 of, because we have a short formal meeting.
Sure.
Any questions for Scott before we go to Tyler? Nope. Okay, we'll just jump in. Tyler, after Tyler gives comments, if you have anything you want to add.
Actually, I might have a question for Scott. That SEAM study you're working on with PGP, did you have an estimated date on when that might be available publicly? And is it going to be public?
It's going to be public soon.
Okay.
I'm going to take a wild guess and say next month.
Okay, cool. I'll look for it. Thank you.
Yeah. It's
all right, Vicky.
We're going to offer it. We're going to offer it to CREPC, but Mary Winkie, who's the executive director of PGP, and I want to make this available sooner rather than later. By the way, we've offered it just informationally to both SPP and to CAISO to make sure that we weren't saying something that was factually wrong. But I have not heard from either Kerry Simpson or Mark Rothleader that they've got any disagreement with it yet.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Vicky, are you ready for me? I do
ready.
have some slides, but maybe in the interest of time, you just want me to hit the highlights on. You had asked me to cover RAP, right? More.
Yeah, because that's a, that's
yeah,
a
kind
step
of
along the way,
in
right? I
addition.
mean,
yeah.
And
in
how does
addition to
RAP
those-
fold into all this ultimately too? You might bring that together for us.
Sure, no problem. And just for folks on the line, this might be the first time you're seeing me and hearing my voice. I'm Taylor Moore. I'm in the resource management group of APS, a little over a decade. Brian Cole probably, I know he's addressed this group in the past. I'm the board member now for AZISA. Brian Cole did accept a promotion to be vice president of resource management starting this year. So you'll probably see less of him and more of me, unfortunately, here. But and then also just quick update in terms of his role backfilling it. Kent Walter is the one from our area that kind of taken over the day-to-day responsibilities. Brian, since Brian moved up. So just that quick update in terms of RAP. I just wanted to kind of share. I imagine there's maybe a various familiarity on the call with the program, but it's called the Western Resource Adequacy Program. It's administered by the Western Power Pool. There's, I don't know, a couple dozen participants, including APS in it. It's a resource adequacy program that's just getting off the ground in the West, catching a lot of news. So you probably have heard of it to some extent. The program operator is Southwest Power Pool. That's a contract out from WPP. It's separate group at SPP than the Markets Plus effort you heard about today and probably in the past. They do have an approved tariff with FERC that got approved about probably about a year ago to the date or so. Maybe it was February last year. Two main components of the RAP program is a forward showing and operations program. And right now we're heavily involved in the creation of business practice manuals that cover each of those components of the program. In terms of its impact to APS and timeline of where we're at, really the program and the participants as a whole are in a kind of a transition. So we've gone from no tariff to tariff, and then now we're moving from kind of what we think might happen to actually trying it in what's called a non-binding phase. And so that non-binding phase, at least for APS as it stands today, will continue through the winter winter 25-26 season. We have there's an election of a binding season in RAP that each participant does, and they can elect a season between summer 25 and winter 27-28. APS selected summer 26. There is a 2-year notice for that binding election in which you can move it out. So 2 years in front of the day that season begins. So for us, it's a May 31st of this year. If we want to hold that date, we'll have to, well, we wouldn't make any notification to hold it, but if we want to push it out, we would make that notification by the end of May this year. So that's a big milestone this year. We're heavily involved in kind of learning as much as we can. In November 1st, kicked off the first operations program. I mentioned the two components, forward showing operations program. We kicked off the non-binding operations program just in November. We've done non-binding forward showing since winter of 2022. So now we're just had a meeting this week really to look at our software system that we upgraded to start transmitting data over. We need to do QA on all that data we're sending and checking out the calculations as a whole participant group. Yeah, and that maybe this last thing I'll mention is some reasons why we're participating in RAP. Regionalization. We think that regional planning methodology that's consistent amongst all participants, be it for loss of load expectation modeling, capacity accreditation. How do you value the capacity credit for variable energy resources? How do you set a planning reserve margin? We think as a region doing that together, making assumptions as a group is a positive, may contribute to future reductions in planning reserve margin compared to the status quo for customer cost savings. Also, RAP is heavily focused on steel in the ground, resources that can be called upon in those tight system conditions and perform. And if they don't perform, reflecting that in the capacity accreditation.
Tyler, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
So as far as sharing and having similar agreement on how the reliability resource adequacy is going to work, are all the neighbors that seem you participating so that it's quote seamless?
Could you ask that again? Sorry.
So if are all the neighbors that border APS's territory, are they all participating in RAP? So you
Oh,
have a similar, like somebody's not saying I wanted 10% reserve margin and you want 12.
Yeah, so that would be a little different. You know, if it's a voluntary program, in terms of neighbors in our area that are participating alongside us, SRP would be the immediate neighbor that is participating, and we've been working closely with them, our resource planning groups, and making improvements to the program as a whole, and making sure that our area is reflected, because this group did start as a Northwest centric, or historically was a Northwest group. So we have some different resources and things to consider that we want to make sure that program takes into account. So definitely, we can't, you know, we can encourage others to join. It's voluntary. So we've done that. So not PacifiCorp, PNM did join a little after us and SRP. I believe us and SRP started participating at the same time. Nevada's been in this group also has a reserve sharing group historically that Nevada's participated in, and PacifiCorp in Utah. So there's, you know, a big, I guess the bigger folks that are our neighbors, other than California, obviously, are starting to participate or have interest in participating and are kind of watching and maybe dipping their toes in and waiting for the right time that makes sense for their entities.
And TEP will have a second to address why they're not participating, since you didn't mention them, or if they're still evaluating. Are there any other questions at this time for Tyler? Okay, do you have some other points you wanted to make still?
Nope, that's pretty much it. Yeah, we got BPMs going this year. Well, the operations program's a big focus. We do have that, maybe if you've been following Markets Plus, I chaired a task force that just kind of wrapped up at the end of the year for the tariff development there, that was all about taking RAP and making it fit within the Markets Plus context. So there is stuff within the Markets Plus tariff that is considering, and Markets Plus also requires RAP participation as a prerequisite to the market, if you weren't aware. So that was important that we, I guess, look at that program and how they can come together as much as possible ahead of the market launch. So we'll continue that. I know that folks on this call may be following the AGX rate tariff, I guess, updates in terms of the rate case. I don't have any specific update to that, but that's also kind of another area where RAP interplays with things that are of interest to this group. I think there's some guidelines and new tweaks on that tariff on that look at RAP participation as well, coming in that form and venue. So that's all I had. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Tyler. And Mike, did you want to offer anything about TEP and RAP or this subject matter?
Hey, thanks, Vicky. No, I don't have anything to add. Yeah, I'm not the best person at TEP to address necessarily, but you know, at this point we are still evaluating. We have interest. It's just have not made any formal moves to join yet, but we are watching it. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions from the board of the members before we turn to the formal meeting, which will be quick? No? Well, we appreciate all the speakers, the education, the updates. It's a lot to track, but there's been some positive developments, it sounds like, and that's all good. We're making our way there. So I'm going to stop the recording and we are going to turn to the formal part of the meeting.